You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run.
I don't know what we're going to pick up. Welcome to the Open Peace Podcast. My name is Jared, and I'm joined here with Aboud, Amir, Kane, my good friends. Aboud, why don't you give yourself an introduction for the people?
Well, sure, Jared. My name is Aboud Cohen. I live in a village on Mount Gerizim, right between the Palestinian and the Israeli borders, and I live with a community called the Samaritans. Many people have heard about the word Samaritan, maybe the Good Samaritan story, but never heard about a community called the Samaritans that lives in the Holy Land here. And in short, we believe we are part of the 12 tribes of Israel who entered the Holy Land 3,000 years ago. We believe in the Torah. We have the 5 books of Moses, but they are a little bit different than the Jewish version of the Torah. Ours is centered on Mount Gerizim, and we believe we never left the Holy Land for 3,000 years. And we have also both the Israeli and the Palestinian IDs. So this is a podcast that I was really interested to join. I was invited by my friend Kane. We worked at an English job, and eventually he let me meet you, Jared, and my friend Amir. And I'm very excited to join this podcast. I think we have a beautiful chemistry, a beautiful team that can actually create something very meaningful and can probably plant a seed that can really sprout a mindset of peace around the world, and I'm also very excited to help the world have a better understanding of how the world works, really, and then go from there and have a positive impact on everyone. So I'm very excited.
Fantastic! Thank you so much, Abu. You have such a unique perspective on things here, and your whole community, the Samaritan community, has been here throughout so many of the trials and tribulations of this land, and I think you guys do offer such a unique insight into life over here. So yeah, like you said, it's great to have you on board, great to have you in the team.
Thank you.
And thank you, Kane, for bringing everyone together. You know, you're the man. Without Kane, without our linchpin, none of this is happening. So, sorry, what was that, Kane?
I'm joking. I said I'm just a people person.
Yeah. That's it. So my name's Amir Salder. I'm originally from Kibbutz Shobal. I was born in Beersheba and lived in Kibbutz Shobal for my early infant years. My family then decided to immigrate to the UK, where I was raised until the age of 18 roughly, when I decided to come back to my homeland here in Israel. I served in the army. I stayed here for a couple of years after the army as well. And I left back in 2012. I went around the world. I traveled around a few different places until I came to the conclusion that I wanted to come back to my homeland and to start my life here and be here, where I feel happiest, where I feel most at home, where I can be myself. And this is what this podcast is all about. It's about making my home and our home, Aboud, and everyone's home here a better place, because we're kind of in the middle of a ongoing conflict that has been ongoing now for 100 years, and a solution doesn't really look inevitable. Like it's not something that's going to happen very soon, and this is what we're here to advance. We want to talk about ways that we can improve people's situation over here, and try and combat the kind of the negative aspects of living here, which we'll go over in the podcast as people get to know us and people see what we're about. Of course, we're all about bringing people together. That's what it's all about here at Open Peace. We're really trying to create connections between people who are supposed enemies. So I'm really looking forward to the challenge. Let's get it going.
Wonderful. All right, I'll take it from here then, Amir.
Yeah.
I'm Kane Kowalski, or Kowalski for you Westerners. And contrary to Jared's introduction, I'm his only friend. I'm from Manchester, England. Um, you could call my father an Israeli, so I've always had a tie to this country. And based on his stories as a child, I always wanted to be here rather than there. And about 3 years ago, I made the decision to actually do that, and I've been here 3 years now. And like you two previous boys said, this is about doing something genuinely positive, genuinely good. Um, like Aboud said, a lot of people don't really know as much as they think they do about this region of the world. And we can show them, right here on camera, they can see the connection it's possible for people of disparate backgrounds to have. And like you said, Amir, it is like 100-year-old conflict, but it goes beyond that. It would be nice to solve a 100-year conflict. That would feel amazing. But in truth, historically, the peoples of this land have had issues for thousands of years. So it'd be an even bigger deal to solve that, Don't maybe not solve, because actually we can't solve anything. We're just, four guys who wanted to do some good.
Hopefully,
The people that are going to make the difference and actually be able to change it is everyone that might listen to this.
That's it.
All right. So, and I am Jared. If you can't tell from my accent, I am the only one here who is American-born. I'm an American-born Jew from the great state of Delaware. Not very great. It's very meh. We all know it, and that's why we love it. My father was born here in Israel on a kibbutz very close to the Jordanian border. Lots of fun stories that I hope to be sharing from my grandfather about that kibbutz, Neve Etan. And I grew up, as a half Jew. My mother's Christian, so that presents its own level of issues, especially here in Israel with the Haredim having so much power in government. But I was raised in Jewish culture. I was raised to love my Jewish heritage, to feel a connection to it, and the stories that my family always told me about this land, they always resonated with me. So I, myself, am an ardent Zionist. That's why I moved here. I willingly joined the army. I was drafted technically, but I willingly joined, and I served in Golani, best damn brigade in the whole army. And and I'm just really hopeful that by the time I have kids, and they won't need to do what we did and be drafted into the army, because hopefully if our message here on this podcast can get across, our children will not have to do what we did. They will not have to get drafted, because hopefully there won't be a draft.
Well, that resonates with me, Jared, so much, because we grew up here on the saying of, "Sheniyeh gdolim, lo yeh tzava." When we get bigger, we're not going to need an army. We're already bigger.
Exactly. When's that going to happen?
It's a very tricky situation over here that we all kind of have been brought up in and have lived through, and I think there's a lot of things that we can do on a personal level to try and change things, and if that's even breaking down barriers, even if it's just a little bit of learning one another's languages, Hebrew and Arabic. I'm sure you know how close those languages are.
For
and
sure.
How easy they are to study if you're an Arab speaker to study Hebrew, and if you're a Hebrew speaker to study Arabic. I think that's one small thing that we could be doing on both sides of the conflict to try and come together and bring people together and have an understanding.
And and one of the best ways to bring people together is with beer. Speaking of which, I need a refill, gentlemen. Amir, you talking for a second? I'll be right back.
Deuce, yeah. Well, there's a lot of history in this land, and I think the most important thing we could do is educate the world a little bit about it, and also smash some of the misconceptions that many do have. And it's a big mission, but it's certainly achievable.
It is. As a Samaritan, I lived with both Palestinians and Israelis, and I always like to say that, hey, I mean, if we did it, there's no reason why
Yeah, why we
everyone can't do
Exactly.
it.
which
And how
And we really enjoy every bits of both cultures, and that the art and the history and the traditions.
which
You know,
and that Abu brings us into another great point of what we plan on doing here, because the lessons you can learn from the conflict that we live in are lessons that can be applied throughout the world, whether it's even race relations in America to issues in the UK, specifically in Northern Ireland, which is something me and Amir have a personal connection with. Stories for later. But these are lessons that everybody in the world can learn from, which is part of why I think everybody around the world focuses so hard on our little strip of land here. Everybody cares about this tiny little sliver of land.
Mhm.
Like this gets so much attention, more than like even other more like arguably more important flashpoints on the globe don't get as much attention as we do.
Well, I think that distraction method they use it as a distraction, don't they? They'll focus in on here, and instead of talking about horrors that are happening in Yemen, Libya, Ethiopia now, they'll use, a little bit of violence here or something that's going on here as a distraction for people, and I think that's
It's also the most religiously charged conflict in the world,
Yeah,
exactly.
that is
Fighting out
true.
over this little spit of land is historically because of religion, and because at least three, major religions in the world believe that this is the Holy Land, and that's what caused us to fight over it hundreds of years
that's
ago.
true. I also want to add,
And it
Kane.
probably, it's a core reason, if not. It's not the only reason, but it is a major reason that we're still fighting over it today.
Yeah, which is a great segue into the first topic I want us to discuss today, Kane. Religion. And this
Religion.
isn't, and for our viewers, this isn't going to be a discussion on is God real. We'll save my rant on that for much later. What we're gonna talk about.
There are no more problems in the world.
Yeah. But what I want us to talk about is specifically the role religion plays in Jewish identity. I want to hear you guys' stance on that, and the power that religious my voice cracked. I'm sorry, internet. And how much power religious leaders seem to wield in not just Israel, Palestine, but in the greater region here in the Middle East. So. Does any of you have an opening statement on that, or do you want me to get the Jared rant out of the way?
Oh, well, we could go on and on with this discussion forever, but yeah, well, in this country at least, obviously it's the Jewish state, officially. Many don't like that, don't agree with that. I'm pretty sure everyone in the world knows this, but also there are, with the only Jewish state, every other state around here is Islamic, and Iran in particular, they have seen the rise of religious theocrats that have brought with them a pretty violent outlook on how religion should lead our lives.
which
Yeah.
which kind of negates
Sure.
religion, like a lot of religious teachings. You know, as far as I know about Christianity, Judaism, Islam, killing is
Mhm.
not part of any of those religions. Yet, you know,
No.
You're right, Amir. I studied in Palestinian schools, and I, even though I wasn't required to attend the Islamic religion class, but I did like to stay anyway and learn about it. And what one of the teachers said is that many people get the wrong idea of what is a shaheed. You know, they think it's that person who has to give his life and then he'll have
Yeah.
heavens. And he told us that many people got the wrong idea. And that's what's
For
causing
our
it.
listeners, Shahid is Arabic for martyr.
Mhm.
well, that's the same. Dude, I've heard about jihad. I've heard a few, you know, different mistranslations and translations of the word jihad, and I've heard that some people translate it to mean a holy war where you need to fight, and that's how we have a lot of these radicals and a lot of the extremists.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
there's an issue with translations. I just want to butt in for a second because, as Kay knows, I'm a bit of a linguistics nerd. It's kind of difficult to translate Semitic languages into Indo-European languages, just because like they're so vastly different, as well as like the ideas of what a word conveys can be very difficult to express in a culture that doesn't have like that general idea. Like, for example, just off the top of my head, the word kami in Japanese, which is often translated into English as God. Kami means God, according to most translations. But the Japanese themselves take particular issue with that translation because it doesn't fully contain the entire meaning of that word. And I feel like the meaning of the word jihad does come across as a sort of kami kind of issue, is sort of comparable to that, especially to the English translation where people say it as like jihad is an Arabic word for holy war or crusade, something along those lines. But it's depending on who you ask, it contains a wide variety of meanings that is kind of hard to point out and to put definitively into English without, you know, a deep understanding of Arabic and more specifically Islamic culture. And
Well, that's a theme that runs intrinsically through the whole idea of this podcast, is destroying conceptions people have. And yeah, there are lots of mistranslated words in the Middle East in general, you know, because
yeah.
outside of the Middle East, the people generally not educated about the Middle East.
Yeah. Also, just as an example of a Semitic language being mistranslated, the English version of the Bible was originally written in Hebrew and then translated from Hebrew to Greek, from Greek to Latin, and from Latin to English. And by the way, I have read both the Tanakh, which is written in Hebrew, and I have read the English Christian Bible. And I see quite a few issues in the translation. I'm not
sure.
criticizing Christianity. I'm
There are
just
many. There are many.
translations are a bit of an issue.
Many mistranslations.
I've heard the
Yeah.
ancient kingdom of Kush in English, it's just written as Ethiopia, when hold on a minute, Ethiopia wasn't a country.
Yeah, it wasn't a country. There was also fun fact for our non-Hebrew speaking listeners, which I'm gonna guess is gonna be the majority of them. The Hebrew version of the N-word is directly related to the kingdom of Cush that you find in the Tanakh and also the Christian Bible. It's derogatory in modern Hebrew, so I'm not going to say it here because
Mhm.
I
Yeah, it
refuse-
is, but you know that's also like kind of a weirdly translated word, you know.
Yeah.
It has historical roots, but now it's considered offensive. But actually, the question you asked, identity, in the beginning. So actually, we can link this back to that, because in Islam, in Judaism, in Christianity, there's splintering in all of those religions, and I'm sure probably many more different denominations. And yeah, there are Muslims that have violent beliefs and believe that killing is the way to get to, you know, the
But
paradise.
we could also point out that those elements exist in every group.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. There's plenty of
Radicalism.
yeah.
There's
plenty
plenty
of
of militant Christians. As somebody who grew up in America, we've seen the rise of Christian ideology in our politics in America for a very long time now. And as
Yeah, we have Yigal Amir in prison, who is basically a Jewish terrorist.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. Also, I want to get the discussion going to my fellow Jews here, and Abu, you can chime in on this with the Samaritan view on the connection between the ethnicity and the religion. But I want to ask Kane and Amir, which do you see as being like, do you feel you're a Jew because of your religion, or do you feel you're a Jew because it's your ethnicity?
That's a very good question.
Yeah, because
Would you care to go first, Amir?
No, you can go ahead, Kane. You can go ahead.
You want me to go first?
It's very
Well, it's changed for me, at least in the last few years. I went to a Jewish school all through my education and learned. We had religious studies and learned about Judaism. So, you know, and I do believe in a higher power. So, in a sense, it is religious to me. It has a religious meaning, but I'm also not a religious person. I wasn't raised very strict. Fair, you know, secular, I guess. But with that, I do have strong belief. But to me, I'm a Jew. That's who I am. You know, it's many people also forget that it's actually an ethno-religious group, and it's not just a religion. Many people are ignorant about that in the world.
yeah.
And yeah, I've always proudly said I'm a Jew.
It's good that you
Always.
can, and I feel like it's a good point you make up that people are very ignorant of Jewish identity and they forget to recognize it's an ethno-religious group, which is a real term that doesn't just apply to us, the Jews. We just happen to be the
Absolutely.
largest example. I mean, well, no, other than Sikhs. Well, no, not even Sikhs, because Sikhs it's more of an ethnic fusion, which is a different classification according to anthropologists. Before I go on my view, Amir, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, it's kind of both. You know, it's also a spiritual and religious or an ethnic thing. It's definitely.
So sorry to interrupt you, Amir. I just got beer down my windpipe.
Breathe.
Oh God, I'm gonna need to smoke that down. Anyway, Amir, you continue.
This is why I'm his only friend.
Yeah.
So, you know, as I said earlier in the podcast, I actually left Israel back in 2012 and I came back a couple of years ago. When I left with a real feeling of frustration, of anger, of... I think frustration is the main one, because I saw this country was going to be stuck in this kind of revolving cycle of violence, and there was no way really out of it. And I actually personally blamed religion. I was like, it's religious people, it's religious zealots, it's extremists that are causing it, and I was very, very upset at all religions, at Christianity, Judaism, Islam, you can name others, all religion. I really went off religion. And I think I kind of went through a personal kind of discovery of rethinking things and looking at things throughout those 6 years where I was away. And one of my main takeaways from that time was that religion isn't the problem at all. It's something that is being used as a tool to be a problem. So you know, there are many, many devout religious Muslims, Christians, Jews who, you know, they follow their religion adamantly, and they're wonderful people, and they do wonderful things for their communities and for their societies. Our problem that we seem to have here is religion being used as a tool to incite, as a tool for hate, as a tool for looking at other people below one another. And that's something that I think we definitely need to tackle. And we need strong religious leaders to step up here. And when there is something that is wrong, or something that is goes against humanity, for them to step up and say that's right and this isn't right, and we, you know, push forward and try and lead their communities in a better way than just propagating hate and well, we have all the truth and, you know, the answer is with us, the answer lies within us, because that's kind of one of the factors that is keeping this conflict alive. You know?
Yeah. But how does that relate to your Jewish identity? Like, what role does religion play in your like your identity as a Jew?
So I think it definitely plays a big part. You know, it definitely plays a big part. At the end of the day, for me, to be able to hold Jewish celebrations in my house, to have Passover here, and the Purim plans up for us to celebrate Purim the way we want to celebrate. All these things are very important to me, and it's part of my family history. You know, people have been doing this for thousands of years, celebrating these holidays, and I want to continue that for sure. It's something that I'm very proud of.
I have something to say about that actually.
Because you say that, Kane. Share with us before I go into my long tirade.
Well, what's interesting is that religion is a huge part of all of our lives, as we say. But if you actually look at religion, halachically, your mother has to be Jewish in order for you to be Jewish, right? And so technically, if we were to ask certain religious extremists who are really strict about halakha, I'm the only Jewish person here. But yeah, I don't think of any of, as you or Jared, Amir, as being any less Jewish than me. You're equally passionate about it. It's played an equally big role in your life. You've spent more of your life here than I have. Do you know what I mean? Like, so religion is really important historically and traditionally, culturally, but I also don't, in my personal opinion, think that that is where the answer lies to solving these problems we have here.
Yeah. So
yeah, I agree with that, definitely, Kane. I think that these religious leaders, though, they do have a part to play in the sense that they have such an impact on their followings. You know, I don't know how much you follow like things that go on in the West Bank or things that are going on within certain communities in Jerusalem, but there are all these sex cults and there are all these weird things going on, and there's all these kind of terrible things going on. And then in the West Bank you have some imams that incite for hate and all these kind of things. If you manage to change that one leader's point of view, their opinion, they start leading the flock, if you like, in a different way. And I think it's not the be all and end all to fixing the conflict here, but I think they definitely have a role to play. When I see leaders who unite and bring Christians, Muslims, Jews, non-believers, all sorts of people together, you know, my hat goes off to them, really.
I agree.
yeah.
I agree, but they're not.
Yeah, I also add a little bit.
religion.
I mean, they're
Yeah, also add a little bit there, Jared, on your point. Until the second grade, I studied in the Samaritan school here, right? And then we only had until second grade, and after that, I had to move to study in Annapolis. And it was a really, really new experience for me. And I remember holding my dad's hand and like crying, like, "Oh my God, no! You know, I'm not. I don't have friends from Nablus. I just went there to get a haircut, actually." So it was a totally new experience, and I grew up mostly with the Samaritan community, so I was kind of almost isolated from the outside world. And when I went there, I ended up having one of my best friends really there, and it kind of opened my mind to like, hey, like people are like us, you know. So it just only takes. I think people underestimate what dialogue and what just hanging out with the person and speaking with him can do. I think that's why this podcast can do something really impactful.
100%.
So, before I give it off to Abu to discuss the Samaritan identity, I want to say that I was raised in a very peculiar situation. Let me put it this way: as I've said earlier in the podcast, my father is Jewish, but my mother is Christian, specifically Irish Catholic. And my mom's side of the family never did very well. Really. I'm just gonna put it bluntly, the mother's side of my family is kind of a mess. There are some people on her side we don't talk to because of what we consider to be dangerous opinions. Direct reference to my grandmother.
Religiously speaking, you mean?
Not religiously speaking, just in reference to their
Or ideologically speaking.
Yeah, ideologically speaking. Like we'll get into that later when we bring up Ireland again, and I'll talk about that.
And I'm sure we will.
Yeah, and my mom saw my dad's side of the family and saw a heritage, an identity to connect to, and she wanted that for me. So she made sure that like I would always be with my dad's side, my grandparents specifically, for any Jewish holiday, whether it was Yom Kippur, Pesach, which is Passover, and Hanukkah. She would always want me there for that. She wanted me to be raised in a Jewish culture, to have something for me to identify with. She wanted me to have that, and I was kind of raised in that. But my dad's side of the family is also atheistic, I guess is the best word to put it. We don't believe in God. And this is a story I can tell. I remember a 5-year-old Jared. Imagine a 5-year-old Jared asking his grandfather, "Is God real?" And him going, "No." See, we go anywhere when we die, you go into the ground, Jared. That's where you go. Verbatim. I remember this conversation verbatim. And I was just like, so we don't believe in God? He was just like, you can choose to believe in God. I don't. And I'm not going to lie to you.
He's going to watch this, Jared, and then he's going to want to kill you.
No, my grandfather's awesome. But
Yes, I've spoken to him many times.
yeah, my family loves Kane. But so I was raised as a Jew, to be connected to Jewish culture, to Jewish heritage, to Jewish history, not in the sense of I believe in God, but because this is my people. You know, like I was raised on stories of King David, not in the sense of he's a man I should follow because he appears in the Bible, but because he was an impressive person. You listen to the stories about him, and the stories we tell ourselves as Jews about David HaMelech, King David. Like, he's an impressive human, and those are things we should follow. I was raised on stories of those who fell at Matzada and what they mean to us as a people today. Because that's the key word, people. I was raised to think of myself as a Jew, irregardless of my belief in God or a higher power. And that these holidays, like how we take Shabbat off, like as a day off. We don't work on Shabbat. We fast on Yom Kippur. I was raised to do that because these are the traditions that were handed down to me, the history that was handed down to me. And to me personally, I find that to be more important than the religious aspect. So, like, I personally don't believe, there's air quotes on that, because whether or not I believe in God changes depending on the day, but I'm mostly atheistic. I view God more as a tool to make myself feel better. For example, on days where I'm particularly missing my father, who is dead, by the way, for the audience, I find myself praying, specifically just to give God a message. Like, in those moments, I recognize I choose to believe just as a source of comfort, which makes sense from an anthropological perspective, because when people look for comfort, they turn towards their community, towards the traditions of that community. And one of the traditions of our community is the faith, is God. Hi, Papa Amir, Papa Sadel.
Late. I'm like half an hour.
Yeah.
And, sorry about that.
So it's fine. The internet got a good shot of your family, so it's fine. But yeah, like that's my view. That's my view on it. I see myself as ethnically Jewish. More importantly, like, my people and my culture is more important to me, and which presents itself some own issues, because as like Kane brought up earlier, according to halakha, I'm not a Jew, according to halakha, because my mother is Christian, and which presents its own set of issues here in Israel. And I've said before, I can't get married in this country because of that. I can, but it's very difficult because there's no civil marriage in this country. It's run entirely through religious organizations. So, like, if I wanted to marry a Jewish woman, it would have to be through the rabbinate, the chief rabbinate of Israel, which would be difficult because the chief rabbinate is controlled by the most orthodox, and when I mean orthodox, I mean orthodox sect of Judaism, Haredim, as we call them in Hebrew.
Problem.
Yeah. So, like, it makes it more difficult for me, because, like, I have to find a rabbi who would be willing to give a marriage certificate to me, a Jewish woman. And even then, there would still have to be a lot of hoops I have to jump through for the chief rabbinate to acknowledge it. So, like, I've already resigned myself to having to get my marriage license either in Cyprus, which is what a lot of Israelis do, rather than having to go through the rabbinate, because it is a hassle, or going back home to America, which my mother is very happy about, because she wants to be at the wedding. So when I told my mom, like, I can't get married here, I have to get married either in Cyprus or America, she was just like, oh, do it in America. Do it. I will beat you if you don't do it in America. My mother's lovely, by the way, don't take this against her. But yeah, I was raised to be proud of who I am as a Jew, ethnically, more important than the religion. Like, we're a people with a history and a culture that has been passed down from generations. And religion plays a huge part of that, although you don't necessarily need to believe, because as a fun statistic for people, American Jews, which are roughly half, or like 48% of the global Jewish population, half of American Jews do not believe in God. And yet they still identify as Jewish, still take part of the holidays, still take part of the general traditions, even without a belief. That is a culture, first and foremost. And religion plays a huge part of it, but it's not the only part. And especially since I grew up in a Christian country, you know, I see these confusions all over the place about Jews and about what it means, and also the weird little things that people outside of the majority religion of a particular territory don't seem to understand what it's like to be a minority throughout the whole space, I'm going to hand it off to Aboud in a second to talk about being a Samaritan in an Islamic population and having to take Islamic classes in school, because in the United States, you know, there's a lot of Christianity, and I remember being in middle school specifically. And I mean, I was always opinionated. And there was a teacher in my English class who was a conservative Christian. and she felt it was an infringement upon her religious rights, according to the First Amendment, that there wasn't prayer in school, or that she wasn't allowed to talk about Christianity to the students. And I remember telling her that that's not an infringement on your rights as a Christian. That's the government protecting us, the non-Christians, from having to have your beliefs shoved down our throats. Because, like, I went to a public school. My school was funded by the state. She, as a teacher, was a state employee. So she can't be endorsing a religion on behalf of the state, because that's what she would be doing as a state employee, talking to her students about Christianity, or telling them like that they should be believer, like this is fact in any way. And I want to hand it off to Abu, because I want to hear your opinion on that, because you had to take Islamic classes, and I never had to take classes on Christianity or the Bible at school, thank God, ironically. Thank God, ironically. But I want to hear what you have to say on that, because I was very happy that the state said I didn't have to pray at school, or that I didn't have to learn about a religion that wasn't my own within school. And like, you had to read the Quran in school. So tell me about that. Like, how did that affect you? How did that make you feel as a non-Muslim?
Yeah. It was, at some point, it was, like, sometimes it was pretty difficult, I remember, because, well, I did feel like a little bit of a minority, like you said. We were like part of a minority. We're only like 400 here. In all the West Bank, there's only 400. Today's 430 maybe. And when I was in the third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, it was all in Nablus, up to high school basically, and even in university. And there was actually some good parts and bad parts having to study the religious class, the Islamic religious class. Like the good parts is I really did learn some interesting things, and I learned why a lot of Muslims like think this way and act this way and do these things. It was really important for me to understand that. It was also fun helping even I helped a student next to me cheat. They basically have the same questions as we do sometimes, like who's the wife of Abraham or something. I remember I helped him cheat on that. So there was some like
I don't even know the wife
interesting.
of Abraham.
It's Rachel, and
No,
he
the
had
wife
another one. So
Yeah, I was about to say, how could I forget that? I was raised by Reformed Jews. In our prayers, we don't just thank the fathers of the people, we also thank the mothers. How did I forget Rachel was Abraham? Oh my God.
it's Rachel.
I feel like such a bad Jew.
So there were some cases like in Ramadan. Take example Ramadan. There's 30 days of fasting, right? And I was in school, and even as a Samaritan, you have to respect not eating publicly, so I had to kind of hide in class. I remember at some point I was in class and I was eating, and suddenly a teacher came in and he didn't know me. He was shocked that he thought I was like cheating on Ramadan, until I explained to him I'm a Samaritan. That's one case. But like you see, another negative case I think I should mention, just to give an example of what we might face, is there was a kid in a karate class that used to talk to me. I think I was a 15 or 16 about
Wait.
Islam.
Karate class?
A karate class, yeah. I have a black
we
belt,
can
don't
do
you know?
karate, yeah.
Oh man, great. Karate.
Yeah.
No fighting.
I mean,
No problem,
I
bro.
mean, we as
Defense
former
only.
soldiers were trained in Krav Maga, so bring your karate shit and stomp it to the ground. But you know,
Even a black belt? Are you sure? Okay.
I mean, I'm not a black belt, but I was raised. I mean, but I was trained on how to smack people around in an army barracks, so I guess,
Yeah.
you know, right?
Rude can swing his fist pretty quick.
Around across your face, Jared.
I don't doubt it. Speaking of Roundhouse, Amir, bus fighter extraordinaire.
What's this? What's this?
Bus fighter extraordinaire.
Story about you getting angry with the bus driver and kicking the door.
Oh, the bus. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, like, fighting a bus. I
And what?
can't think of many people who would get mad and look at a vehicular object and think, I'm gonna fucking fight you, you son of a bitch. I can't think of many people who would do that.
To
But I
be,
never did.
this isn't even for comedic purposes, but quite honestly, Jared, you are one of the only other people I know that might do something like that.
Really? I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
when you decide that something's like gotta go, to hell with the consequences. Jared
fair-
ensues.
Asshole, though.
That driver was a bit of a dick, yeah.
It's late. Just wait. Just wait, you know?
Yeah, like I mean, bus drivers here can be a bit of a dick, but Abood was talking about being
Yeah, let's get back to a good story.
yeah, Abood's story.
Yeah, so I was talking with this kid about Islam, and eventually, you know, after he knows I'm a Samaritan, he ends the conversation with only Muslims will go to heaven. Of course, I know that this is not really common belief.
I've heard that same thing back in America. It's like, I'm Jewish. Oh, so you're not going to go to heaven? Why don't you want to go to heaven? Like,
You see, yeah, I'm pretty aware of that. I'm just, you know, saying I did get through this. I also got invited to Islam more than a few times.
yeah,
So I did have to face it, and it did give me some kind of alienating feeling, if you know what I mean. But it wasn't actually. I think 95-96% of the times it was a really pleasant stay, you know, and this is why I really want to share my story here, because it's not as bad as people think. It just takes a few
yeah.
hangouts for you to understand that even though there's like a majority of are Muslims here, but they don't have this radicalism that many people might think.
Yeah, which is specifically an issue in the West with Islamophobia, where a lot of people think of like, oh, Muslims moving in, they're gonna take over. There's gonna be Sharia, and we're all gonna have to convert to Islam, and like there's all that fear. But the vast majority of Muslims are just like, dude, you do whatever. If you want to join Islam, you join Islam. Like, cool. But the vast majority do not give a shit about any of that.
Yeah, and also one more thing. Shechem, you know, some people think, like when I tell some people I'm going to Shechem, or I go to Shechem, they get surprised, especially from Israel. He's like, oh no, Shechem, you know, how do you go there? But actually, trust me, I'd feel like much safer in Shechem at like 1 a.m. at night than in like some parts of New York, I think, you know.
Oh,
Something like that.
oh yeah, but I mean, but also to be fair, you were born there and lived there. There's
Yeah, but I'm talking about like the
It
actual
doesn't live
place.
in the Balata camp, man.
yeah.
Yeah, I see what you mean, Jared. I'm talking
Also,
about the
speaking
actual.
about cities you can feel safe in, I was talking with my cousin earlier today, and we were discussing we were discussing South Tel Aviv, which of course to him is a death sentence to walk into. But then I reminded him that I'm from Wilmington, Delaware, which if anyone knows anything about Wilmington, it was the murder capital of America for like 10 years running, only to be overtaken by either Detroit or Baltimore. And we're still fighting for that title back. Like my grandfather used to describe Wilmington as a sea of anarchy with a few islands of civilization. That's the way my granddad described it. So when like I remember my cousin Sivan, he was telling me like, oh, South Tel Aviv is so dangerous. And I'm like, I've been around South Tel Aviv at night drunk, and I've been fine. South Tel Aviv ain't got shit. on South Wilmington. I'm not even joking. If you're in Wilmington and you're south of the river, it is. Oh, it's so fucked, man. I can tell stories about who moved into a place on Lafayette Street, which is the worst place to be in Wilmington, and hearing all sorts of horror stories from these people. Like, it's like they caught two random people fucking in their backyard. Their daughter wakes up screaming and wetting the bed every night because she's so afraid of living in that area. Gunshots every single day, like just like on their street, just every day. And like to me, that's the basic line of a bad neighborhood. So when I hear people say, "Oh, South Tel Aviv is a hellhole," I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Yeah. Well, people used to say that about where I was living in Netanya, like, in Shkunat Sela.
I thought you were going to say about Manchester, mate. Manchester. I thought you were gonna
That's what
talk
I'm
about-
saying. Like, people used to say that to me about where I was living in Netanya. I was like, these people have never been to Manchester.
Oh, yeah, which
There's no place in Israel that's as bad as Manchester.
Oh, not a place that I've seen. And also, just for the people there, common thing when I first met Kane and he was telling me about Manchester, I remember telling my mom about it, and I was just like, "Oh yeah, he's British. He's from Manchester." She was just like, "Oh, so he's fancy then?" And I'm just like, "No, he's from Manchester, Mom. According to him, Manchester is just Wilmington with like 200,000 more people."
Well, that's the way you phrased it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the way you made it sound to me.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Bring it. Yeah, no, sorry. Go on. Go ahead. Ken.
what was that?
Yeah.
No, go ahead. You were just going to say something there.
No, I was gonna say that there's a crazy paradoxical reality in this part of the world, in Israel, especially because it is a a democratic country in theory, and, and there's plenty of like conflict here. War breaks out every other year, and like it's also funny because when we live in the center or in the majority of the country, we can live here probably more safely than we can where us foreigners actually come from.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the country is way.
but England's not at war,
Yeah, I mean, like to be fair, in this century, when Israel goes to war, most people don't really see that much change in their lives, as opposed to
Right.
the 20th century. Yeah,
That's why it's a paradox.
yeah. I mean, yeah, because it's like we're constantly at war. That is like that we can drive to in like an hour at most. But
civilian life goes on, like
yeah, like it's a very weird.
more cordially than it does in England, and
Yeah.
I guess in America, from what you say, Jared.
This is one of the
It depends on the place. Also, hold on. We're gonna move on to the next topic, which I will introduce in a second after I get my next beer.
Go on, Amir, you were about to say something.
Yeah, that's it. While he's getting his beer, I just want to mention for people out there that maybe haven't visited Israel or haven't been over here at all, life when a war does happen or when there is sporadic fighting, everything in Tel Aviv can be normal, but for the people along the Gaza border, in the small villages, in the kibbutzim that are in the area, life is very traumatic. Now, especially, I'm talking about the younger people, the kids, the infants, the people that have to go through that kind of cycle. It's a horrible way to live. And I just think that we as a people on both sides, we need to do more, because it'll be the same in Gaza for when our rockets and when our bombs retaliate, and when they hit there, it's horrific for the infants and for the kids growing up there, and it's actually easier to radicalize people, after an incident, after a bombing, after anything like that. So I think something that we need to look at is not saying it's okay for these guys over here. You know, if you live in central Israel, it's fine. If you know you're not on the northern Lebanese border. For me, an Israeli is an Israeli. It doesn't matter whether you live in Eilat or whether you live in Metula or whether you're Aboud over there in Al Grizim. It doesn't matter to me. If you attack Aboud, you're attacking me, and if you're attacking the guy in Metula, you're attacking me. So I think that we have to learn from previous mistakes that we've made to try and de-escalate things as quick as possible when things do flare up. You know, one of my best friends from the UK flew over last year to visit, and I was really looking forward to taking him down to my kibbutz and show him my home and show him we were planning to go down to En Gedi that day. Do lots of things, and that happened to be a day where Hamas and Islamic Jihad started firing hundreds of rockets over at the south, and we had to cancel all of our plans and change everything. And I just think it's within our power and within the people's power over there in Gaza to try and change the reality, because we can't continue this cycle. This cycle will lead us nowhere but carnage, you know. And I really think it's time people start listening to other voices and getting to know one another and because I don't know, you know, I may have mentioned it in a different podcast, but the situation in Gaza 50 years ago, 40 years ago was better than the situation that is now, which is so crazy and so sad. So I really, really hope that our podcast can give a platform for people to speak about different things and to voice their opinions and to combat the hate and the racism that seems to be perpetuated on both sides.
Yeah, words can change.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
So, which Amir brings us into our final segment for the night. Thank you for the transition while I was away. Which is going to be stories from our families about living here, our own personal stories about living here, which are either funny or speak some kind of lesson, whatever you want to share. I'll start off with a funny one just because I love this story and also because it pertains
Jared.
to me drinking. And Kane can confirm this one, is that apparently you get enough alcohol in me, I speak languages I don't know while sober.
Mind you, this is a story of conflict rather than of
Yeah,
resolution.
it is. So it relates. When Kane first moved into his place in Netanya, I remember I went down to Netanya to hang out with him, and we went out drinking. And you know, we have a few pints. We go and we stumble drunkenly back to his apartment, and there's this other Russian guy.
You're really stumbling.
Yeah, I mean, I'm exaggerating. Come on.
We had off. Well, no, it's a key point because we were not staggering around. Like we were walking straight.
Like the other guy who I'm kind of sure was drunk or was some type of intoxicated.
Mhm.
But like he was this short little Russian guy who was not speaking very politely. He ended every sentence in the word "blet," which for Russian is shit. It's like for Russians, when you end every sentence with "blet," it's a sign that you're being a bit of a dick.
Well, it's a challenge to combat.
I mean, it pretty much was like. Because as we were walking back to your place, we see this guy coming, walking towards us. We're walking, we're talking. You know, we see him coming. We move a bit, you know, like not hog up the sidewalk, because we specifically don't want to bump into people. He tries his damnedest to bump into you, Kane, and tries to start shit.
Oh, he walked through me. He just walked into me and through me, and didn't bother to look back.
Yeah, didn't bother. I mean, he didn't bother to look back other than to cuss you out for walking into him.
No, he turned around because I had stopped after he'd like already crossed the street. he turned around and I was still standing in the same spot, like staring at him with my arms wide, like, what are you doing, man? And so then he started shouting at me, and then he starts chasing me down the street.
Yeah.
And,
Guys, you want a problem in Hebrew, the word blat is Russian.
yeah.
And I just remember him getting into your face, like seeing things escalate, me kind of drunkenly backing off of it, thinking, how do I want to play this? Because, like, I don't want to be getting into fights. Like, I moved to Israel partly to start a new life. I don't want to get into fights like I did back home.
That's rich. You've forgotten a part of the story, clearly.
Yeah.
I just walked away from the guy at first. We were walking away, and then I could still hear him in the back. Just like shouting from, like, you know, however far behind. And then Jared turns around and he says to me, "Yo, are we fighting or what?" And I was like, "Why? Is he still following us?" He was like, "Yeah, he's still coming, man." So I was like, "Okay, let's stop." So I turned around, and then next thing you know, this little Napoleon Dynamite character standing in my face. This little Russian guy, and he's like breathing it, like he's whispering to me, and it's just like I'm about to knock this guy out. And then I thought, you know what? I do not want to get into trouble. What is the point? So I looked at that, and I was like, "Do you want to do something about this before it gets really ugly?"
Yeah.
And then Jared snapped into action.
I remember getting into his face with the idea of, I want to defuse this. I don't want to ruin our night by having to deal with the cops over an attempted murder. I mean, like, as goofy as we seem here, we have a tendency to snap and snap hard.
Well,
like,
I think that applies more to a couple of us.
It applies to a lot of us here. We have a tendency to snap, but like when I remember that night, like I'm getting in between that. I'm just like, all right, let's fucking calm this down, guys. We don't want anything to do. And I remember the guy, he starts backing up. He's just like, oh, I don't want anything. Puts one hand literally like this behind his back. He came. You can remember what I asked him? I'm like, you got a knife, bro? Because, like, when I see people do that, the first thing that pops out into my mind, they're like, motherfucker's got a shank on him or some shit. And, like, that's what he's trying to signal to me, because that's the signal back home. Like, don't fuck with me, I'll stab you. You put your arm like this behind your back. And then, like, and Kate can confirm this. He's like, he puts both hands up, he's just like, no, starts turning around, lifting up his shirt, and I'm just like, and that's when I just instantly knew this motherfucker's a bitch.
Yeah, I just, like, at that point, I knew he wasn't a threat, so I just, like, walked through him the way he'd done to me, and just walked away from him.
Yeah,
and he was just shouting shit at us. But, you know,
he's
like the girl can be like that.
Yeah, and he's just still sitting there shouting every word, ending every sentence with blet, and, like, I just remember I got into his face, and Kane can confirm this. I said, men don't talk like that in Russian. I remember saying that and him looking so surprised that I spoke Russian.
Which you don't.
Yeah, which I don't. I don't speak Russian, but apparently drunk Jared does. 6-beer Jared speaks Russian. Like,
the crazy thing about this story is that it's the kind of story someone will tell you about themselves and you'll kind of go, yeah, right.
Yeah.
And like, the minute they walk away, you just go, yeah, woo, Pinocchio. But I was there. He actually did suddenly speak Russian to the guy, and the guy was suddenly, like, surprised. And then afterwards, I asked him, what did you actually say to him in Russian? And he says, I said something like, men don't speak this way. And so I was like, well, tell me, how do you say it? And he was like, I'm going to be honest, bro, I don't even remember.
Like you asking me that, me standing there for a second thinking like, what did I say? How does that translate to Russian? And then me just going like, I can't even remember. Like, which is why now it's a running joke between us that, like, how many beers does it take before I can speak Chinese?
Yeah,
Be in
exactly. I can't wait to find out. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that happens in Israel, like every day. Just, but it's no big deal. Like
Yeah.
people here are hot-headed. They fight over something, and then like
And
the
then
best friend.
yeah, and but like the interesting thing is that once it's over, you know, which is a
Yeah.
very old school type of scenario that like kind of like we have in the States. Like, for example, back in America, back in Delaware specifically.
The Barnacle boxing thing, huh?
Yeah, oh yeah, I was about to say bar
Yeah,
fight boxing. Like two guys at a bar get into an argument, they get into a fight, they take it outside. They have like they fight till one person gives up, and then the loser buys the winner a beer, and then that's the end of it. Which is kind of like how it is over here in Israel with that kind of shit. You know?
Well, we do that in England, but we just don't buy the guy a beer afterwards.
Yeah,
well, maybe
weird to me. It seems like a huge dishonor.
conflict. You know, we got to draw the line somewhere, and
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
like, we've gotten kind of good at
There
that.
are nicer examples. There are nicer examples of that Middle Eastern warmth that we could tell you about. Like a great one, actually. Such a small moment, but I was on a bus one time heading back from Tel Aviv, probably to Netanya, and this guy got on, and he comes along. He sits like a seat or two in front of me, and just in front of him is a guy watching a basketball game on his phone. Now, in England, probably most places, the guy would sit and watch his game. The other guy would mind his own business and just sit down, look out the window, look on his own phone. But not in Israel. The guy that just got on leans over the back of the seats and he's like, "Yo, who's playing? Who's playing?" And the guy was like, "Oh, I don't know. It's the Lakers and the Bulls." And the guy was like, "Oh, can I watch with you?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, man." And he lifts the phone a little higher. And these two complete strangers just start watching a basketball game together. And I was watching and I thought it's really small and probably went unnoticed by everyone else on the bus because it's just a daily occurrence here.
Yeah,
But it's really heartwarming, actually.
I mean, it really is. I mean, there's so many heartwarming things that can happen here. I mean, most heartwarming stories I can remember happened to me when I was in uniform. Like, I mean, like so many times when like I would be on the way back home from Army, and I would be in uniform, and like I would get a call on the phone from like my family or somebody else, and I would pick it up and I would start speaking English. And once the conversation was done, people would come to me like, Lama, which means like soldier, you speak English? Why? I just have to explain to them like I'm American, I'm a lone soldier. And the immediate response to that was, "Do you have anywhere to spend Shabbat? Do you have your family lives back home? Do you have anywhere to spend Shabbat? Come spend Shabbat with us. Baruch Hashem, like come spend Shabbat with us." Like hand on the heart. It's like those are the most heartwarming stories that I can remember that always come off of my head.
I remember one guy saying a difference I don't know a difference between what or where, but he was like, what Jewish people do in Israel is that if you ask a random Israeli in the street what's the time, he'll tell you like, what? Like, don't you have a clock? But if you go to his house and you ask him for some kind of like a place to stay, he'd be like, yeah, sure, welcome.
Yeah. I mean, that's a common story. My granddad always told me about life, about how Israelis work, because like in America saying, "Oh yeah, come visit, you can stay with us anytime, just show up." It's a platitude, in America. And I assume in the UK too. Meanwhile, here in Israel, if you say that, it's taken very literally. Israelis mean it when they say that. So like my grandma told me, like if you're visiting Israel, you live in America, and you tell an Israeli, "Oh yeah, come visit me. Like come visit me. You can stay with us. It'll be great." You can say that, but don't be surprised if an Israeli shows up at your door with packed suitcases.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, that's just like Israelis. Like in Israel, if you say something, you mean it. Saying something is a commitment. It really is.
It's more that people don't say anything they don't mean here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. People say what they mean. It's a very honest culture.
Yeah, it's just direct.
Yeah.
There are direct people everywhere, but here it's literally the
It can
lifestyle.
come off as rude sometimes to people who don't quite get the culture. It can, what?
Yeah.
Someone's
It's
asking you
easy, for sure.
Yeah.
what back. But I think it's something that we can definitely share, and I think definitely it could help debates and discussions, because sometimes a lot of the times things kind of fall between political correctness lines and these kind of things. Whereas when you're being direct with someone, you know exactly where you stand. You're either here or you're here, and there's no kind of gray area.
Yeah.
And I think
But that can also be like a very heavy issue. Like for example, like Americans have a weird view of Israelis when they meet them, due to because Israelis are very blunt. American culture, you have to give platitudes to be polite. Israelis don't quite do that, and there's a great example that I always talk to that was one of the biggest culture shocks for me after moving here was Israelis will be in your face, which according to Americans is aggressive. Here in Israel, that's just how you talk to people. Israelis talk to people here, hey, what's up? How you doing? Americans don't talk like that. The American rule is if I hold out my arm like this and you're within that, you're too close. Meanwhile, here in Israel, the rule is I need to be able to smell your last meal in your breath. That's what it seems like to me. That's the biggest thing because Americans find Israelis to be rude, but that's just because the manner system here is different, which is I feel a huge source of contention between general Middle Eastern culture, because that's not just an Israeli thing, it's a general Middle Eastern thing. Yeah.
Well, what if you get into in Shechem, and then you'll have to shake hands with 6 people, 7 people? Well, here sometimes they don't only shake hands; you have to kiss 7 multiplied by 2, 14 cheeks.
Oh my
That's it.
dude, don't remind me of that. Because when I was in the army, one of the first things they had me do was because Golani is mainly based up in the north where all the Arabs live, and in these Arab cities in Israel, the police are very understaffed because Israel prefers to employ police from a local area, and because Israeli Arabs don't really join the police, they don't trust them. That leaves a lot of the duties of guarding places to us soldiers. So that was one thing I had to do. I had to guard marketplaces, train stations, bus stations, all over these Arab cities in the north. And I remember and by the way, I should mention this to the audience, these Arab residents weren't angry to see me there. They saw me as a soldier there guarding these places. And the first thing they thought was to come up to me and say, why are we here? Are we is there an issue? Was there a threat? Are terrorists planning to attack this place? What's going on? Are you gonna keep us safe? And I would have to tell them don't worry, everything's fine. I'm just here to make sure they stay fine. That was basically the line we were told to tell. And immediately after saying that, all these our fellow Arab citizens here, after hearing me say that, they would just be oh, thank God bless you, everything, trying to shake my hand, I would kiss me on the cheek, which is very weird to me as an American. I don't know what to do. I'm strangers kissing me. Oh, I don't know what to do. And and it just so many people came up to me with hot tea, with hot coffee, just and these are in Arab cities. I need to reiterate that I was an Israeli soldier in uniform, guarding places in an Arab city within Israel proper, not the West Bank, that these examples pertain to.
Mm-hmm.
People would just bring me tea and coffee.
yeah.
People don't associate that with our conflict,
No.
Yeah, but that's an aspect people don't think of. People think of Israel, they think, oh, it must be all Jews, 100%. I'm no, 25% of our fellow citizens are Arab.
Mm-hmm.
Are non-Jews, and Arabic is an official language of Israel. I believe it still is. I mean, the nation-state law, I think, demoted the Arabic language. I'm gonna Google that up real quick. But while I do
It's
that,
a very problematic law. Very, very problematic. I know it caused a lot of pain to our Druze brothers as well. I know
Oh, this is what a lot of people cared about because the Druze are a much beloved community here in Israel. Much beloved. All right, sorry. So yeah, I'm looking it up now. Arabic was demoted from official language status to recognized language, which is bullshit. 25% of the country speaks Arabic as a native language. I think that deserves to be an official language.
for sure.
Mhm.
And by the way, the nation state law that Israelis much complained about and talked about before it was passed and still complain about. One of the provisions in that law was, which I believe was removed, but made me very worried about it, was that stating that the right to self-determination was exclusively the right of Jews within Israel, which worried the fuck out of me when I heard that was in the bill. Because, like, who gets to decide who is a Jew? Not only what that particular line in the law means for our non-Jewish citizens, but also for me personally, like, because what does that mean for me? Because going off the halakhic definition, as we discussed earlier in the podcast, like, you know, I'm not a Jew. Does that mean I don't have the right to self-determination? Does that mean I can't vote? Does that mean I don't have civil liberties? What does self-determination mean? What rights am I gonna lose because my mother's a Christian and self-determination is the right of Jewish people and how they didn't get to define who is Jewish? What does that mean for our brothers and sisters in this country?
They define Jewish power, you know? Like, they hold a monopoly on the weapon, yes, but I think that's a big platform for themselves to deciding for every person to themselves and decide,
Yeah.
you know, what they are.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, but when you put that kind of language into a bill passed by the Knesset, like it becomes a bit of an issue because then how who gets to talk about it?
No, I agree. I agree fully. Very, very it's caused rifts within the community, which is exactly the problem. We don't need to be building, we don't need to be destroying, but we need to be building. So, you know, I'm sure that when we have a new government, they can scrap I just think that when it comes to deciding who's Jewish, I think, you know, even if they argue within themselves who's keeping the religion right and who's not. And this is a question that will go on for thousands of years.
Oh yeah, it's only for Jews on Earth. Like,
Yeah, I think
but I just want to say one thing before I hand it off to somebody else because I haven't taken up a lot of time. I just want to say one thing, and then I'm going to be done with this Jared rant. The issue is of who gets to define who is Jewish. According to the Israeli government, the Haredim have a lot of influence in that. Because, I mean, when I was moving to Israel, I had to get a certificate of Jewishness. The Yodut, before I could make Aliyah legally and claim Israeli citizenship. And which gave me all sorts of issues because of my Christian mother. And even though I am circumcised, I never got a Hatafat Dam Brit because my circumcision wasn't done by a moil. So it presented me an issue, and the only rabbi we could find in my area who was willing to give me a Tudat Yodut was a Reform rabbi who said, I will give it to you on the condition of you get a Hatafat Dam Brit. Here's the guy I know. You pay him $60. He'll say a prayer and then put a thumbtack into your cock. Yeah, I did that to move to this country, and the reason why I had to do that was because of the Haredim, who have so much influence in government and get to define who is Jewish.
Yeah.
they shouldn't be having.
See, this is what I meant earlier about religion, you know, being a little too big of a thing.
Exactly. I actually heard a guy on the news recently saying that there should be complete separation between church and state in this country. Personally, I think that's a winning combination.
I agree.
really help the country advance. You know, your religion has no influence on how good of a citizen you're going to be, on how much tax you're going to pay, on what jobs you're going to. It has nothing to do with any of it. So it shouldn't be.
Interestingly, our circumcision sometimes is done by, well, not sometimes, a lot of times it's not done by a rabbi or an Israeli. Sometimes it's also done by a Palestinian. We still get the Israeli ID, so I guess our situation is a little bit different.
The legal situation is that you were born in this area. I was claiming Israeli citizenship under Aliyah.
Yeah.
It's an entirely different.
Correct.
A little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Do you guys? Is it still after 6 days of food circumcision?
Yes, on the 8th day actually. So.
8. Right. Well, yeah. I mean, to keep to the point a little bit, the religion is massively important to so many people in this part of the world. So there's no way we could possibly get rid of it. But anytime you see a cycle,
Yeah, no, I'm just saying we definitely don't want to do that. Definitely not.
no, yeah, like we have a repetitive cycle here. Like you called it a revolving door earlier or something like that. It's going on and on and on. It's the same thing all the time. And anytime you see a cycle, you can't keep doing the same thing. Everyone knows Einstein's quote about what true insanity is. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And we can't do that if we're expecting to make a change or fix anything here. So I think it's really a question of us holding ourselves back a lot in this country, not just this country, but this region of the world. And it's about looking for routes to progression. And really, I think the separation of, let's call it synagogue. I'm joking. It's a really important step, actually, I think, in that direction.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, fellas, before we go, I want to ask just one final question because I'm intrigued by it. Zionism. A lot of people have the opinion that Zionism is racist. I don't feel that it is. I feel Zionism itself is a bit of a issue because it's essentially Jewish nationalism, you know, which nationalism isn't inherently an issue, although it can become an issue if you take it to a wrong direction. And for our closing statements on this, because we want to talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict, I want to say that even though I love Israel, this is my country, we have a historic connection to all of the lands between the Jordan and the Mediterranean, which includes the West Bank. And the issue, it seems to be here in Israel, is that like annexing the West Bank means either getting rid of either the Jewish or the democratic nature of the state of Israel, which is something that is very important to me. I want Israel to be Jewish and democratic. That means having a Jewish majority and still being a democracy. And if Israel annexed the West Bank, we could either be Jewish or a democracy. Because if we annexed the West Bank and said we wanted to be a Jewish state, that would mean we would have to disenfranchise all of those Arab people who live in the West Bank in order to maintain being a Jewish state. Or we annex the West Bank, we could either choose to be democratic and give up the Jewish nature. And that is not something I want as a Zionist. So, like, keeping both of those factors in the state is more important to me than Eretz Yisrael Shlema, which means the complete land of Israel in Hebrew for viewers. And, like, that's what it seems to be important to me. And, like, if you really look into Zionism, like, I support the existence of a Palestinian state or the right of the Palestinians to choose to have a state, because Zionism says if Jews as a nation have the right to self-determination through a state, then isn't that true for everybody?
It is indeed. And I think this is exactly what we're here to talk about over the next coming podcasts. I think that at the end of the day, the Palestinian people deserve the right to decide whether they would like a state, autonomy, one state, two state. They need to be part of the discussion just as much as anyone else over here. And I think that's how we need to progress. With your question, Zionism is racism. I really don't see that at all. I think that history has proven the need for a Jewish state. I think that the kind of horrors that the Jewish people have gone through throughout the centuries, whether it's in Europe or whether it's in Middle Eastern countries or whether it's in the land of Israel itself, Roman conquests, throughout all these different times we've gone through real suffering, real horrors, and we kind of carry that with us everywhere we go. Whether that's Europe, Africa, Asia, or wherever.
Sure.
And I think that Israel is key to not ever going down these horrific routes again. I was brought up with the history of the Holocaust being strong in my family, and my grandmother's from Romania and the Holocaust.
Was she sent to a camp? Was any of your family that bore you sent to a camp?
So actually, no. My family managed to stay in Bucharest. I don't know the exact story, but he was made with the Romanians there. They took Jews from the villages there and they took them to camps. But kind of the people that were in the cities left kind of a little bit more to themselves. I have one family member who was sent to a camp, and when it was liberated, made her way to Israel. I also have a cousin whose grandfather was one of the first people to actually shoot at the ghetto uprising in Warsaw.
Really?
Yeah, crazy story. He managed to escape.
First to shoot in the Warsaw Uprising. You said that right. I heard that right.
Wait, what?
First to shoot in the Warsaw Uprising can easily be bull.
That's crazy. Do you know something? Do any of you know someone called Mary Berg?
Mary Berg? Name what she's known for, and I might, because the name's not picking up in place.
Oh, no, second. No, not Mary Berg. What am I talking about? It's it won't come to me now. It will soon though. She's famous for she wrote diary similar to Anne Frank, but in the Warsaw Ghetto.
The only two names that can come up to me from Holocaust stories are Anne Frank and Eli Wiesel. Or Wiesel.
Yeah.
Actually, last year I went to Poland and I went to Auschwitz-Birkenau.
Really?
And it just solidified all of my previous thoughts and all of my ideology, if you like. It reinforced everything for me.
Yeah.
And made my choice to live in Israel that much clearer and that much more simple, if you like. And I think that through education we can do so much, guys.
For sure.
Learning about the horrors of the past, learning about the mistakes we've made. It can really, really help push things forward.
Even something like understanding Zionism, I think is something really important. I often get asked are you Samaritan Zionist? And my usual answer is I know in a sense, but I don't think I understand Zionism enough to say if we are or not. We really don't follow Zionism specifically. But what I'm trying to say is that usually the person who is asking is assuming it's a bad thing. And that's something
which leads into a question I have for you, Aboud, is a non-Arab Muslim living in an Arab Muslim area. What a Christian, or
like
when people think of Zionists, what do they think in that area? Because I mean, like everyone in the West knows that, like when you hear somebody with a slightly Muslim-sounding name using the word Zionist, it is most definitely an insult. The way they're using it. So like, what is the view of the people of like your neighbors in Shem and Nablus when they hear the word Zionist?
Yeah, they in Arabic they say Sahine, and this is really important to get. So a lot of Palestinians, they say our problem is not with the Jewish people and the Jewish religion. Our problem is with the Zionists. That's something that they say. And I think they associate the word Zionist really with the occupation, right? So Zionist means occupiers. That's how they think of it. And this is probably something important
No,
to.
no. Zion is the name of the land. So
Well, it's the name of the hill that Jerusalem was founded on.
Yeah,
right,
but
yeah.
there it's,
Yeah,
in the
that-
Palestinian territories, it got so
that's
associated
the-
with the Israelis and the occupation. It got so associated with that.
Zionism is simply the belief that Jews have the right to a land where they can call it their own.
Yeah,
Um,
and self-determined. Basically, that's it. It doesn't
That's
mean
what
that
it
this
means.
land is just for Jews or just for, it doesn't mean
No,
anything.
not even,
like
not at all.
No, it's just about self-determination, really. And I think, coming out of the Holocaust, it really makes that so much more.
Poignantly necessary.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Ken. Thank you. Especially my family as well. For people that don't know, I also have a side of me that is Syrian. Now, my Syrian roots are actually from Spain and Portugal, from Yunus Farad, from the Spanish Inquisition, where my family were kicked out of Spain and Portugal for just being Jewish, and they actually made their way to Syria because actually Khaled, Damascus, initially they had huge Jewish populations that were doing very well. People that were living there for hundreds.
We should also point out that for the majority of history, Christian lands were not a good place to be a Jew, while Muslim lands were the more favorable option. Muslims were very kinder to us than Christians ever were until very, very recently.
Fun fact: for when Crusaders came to fight Salah ad-Din, I believe that Jews and Muslims fought side by side to defend Jerusalem.
Yeah, even the Samaritans helped Salah ad-Din, actually.
When Jerusalem fell to the Crusaders, fun fact, the Christian Crusaders didn't just slaughter the Muslims, they slaughtered every non-Christian in the city.
And these are some of the things that people don't know. We're really, trying to get these things out there, and these little things that kind of miss the history books, or they miss the textbooks, or they don't get talked about in university or school. We're really here to kind of show that. Another big myth of Judaism, if you like, or if the land of Israel, is that the diaspora after the Roman conquest, it was kind of that's it. Jewish life in Israel was finished, and everyone was spread out, and you lost everything.
Well, that's what the Romans wanted us to think.
Yeah, it's not the case. Jews carried on living in small pockets all over the land of Israel for centuries after, and spread throughout the whole of the Middle East. Baghdad was, I believe, at one point 1/3 Jewish.
Wait, you see asking the percentage of the population of Israel-Palestine after the Roman-Jewish Wars?
What's that? Sorry?
I said you were asking about the percentage of the population that was Jewish after the Roman-Jewish Wars.
Yeah.
Let's see. After the third,
Crusade.
yeah. I mean, I'm only butting in on this because I'm a huge history nerd, internet. But let's see here. After the third Roman-Jewish War, which was the last one, the Bar Kokhba rebellion, the Romans committed what a contingent, not a majority, but a contingent of modern historians consider to be a genocide. They killed about 1 million people out of a population of around maybe like 3 million, from what I remember from reading. And a vast majority of the surviving population after the Third Roman Jewish War were taken as slaves out of Israel to around Europe, but mainly a region of Roman-controlled Germania, which was called Ashkenaz by the ancient Jews, which is where we get the term Ashkenazi Jews from in the modern day. This is a fun fact. But at the immediate end of the Third Roman Jewish War, Jews would have still been in the minority because the province of Roman Judea would have been heavily depopulated, but still mainly Jewish. It wasn't until like maybe 50 years after the end of the Third Roman Jewish War, when Roman and Greek settlers started coming in, that Jews started to get out in number. It wasn't until maybe a generation after the First Roman Jewish War.
Absolutely. It's another people have no idea really what kind of relationship we have in this part of the world with one another. Like, nobody other than people that have been to Israel and spent serious time in Israel, nobody knows, for example, that we call the Arabs the cousins, right?
Yeah.
We literally talk about them as if they're family members, and
Well, they are,
We are,
Anybody religious. For anybody who's religious.
But what I'm saying is that there's no malice day to day when we mention Arabs, we get along with them just fine. Really, the governments, people to people.
People
Best friends.
in my unit in the army in Golani, we had 2 Arabs in my platoon.
Yeah.
We had 2 Arabs in my platoon, one Muslim Bedouin and one Christian Arab from up north near the border with Lebanon named Nazir. I have a funny story that I will tell on a later podcast that involves Nazir. He's my boy. But we have Arabs and Jews on a personal level get along just fine in this country, and one day when Laith is available, we'll finally get on the podcast when we're recording, and it will show that Jews and Arabs can get along just fine. Jews and Palestinians can get along just fine.
100%.
Yeah, it's mainly because again, back to my 2 friends in Golani who served with me. They were part of my platoon. They were part of Golani, akhi. I would march to hell and back for them with full knowledge that they would do the same for me. Right? Jews and Arabs and Palestinians, more specifically, are not natural enemies. We are not. Palestinians are, Jews and Arabs in general are a related people. We're cousins with Arabs in general, but Palestinians, the relationship's even closer, my dudes. Relationship's even closer with Palestinians. We're not just related to them culturally and generations back, we're related to them ethnically as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Palestinians share a lot of the same blood that we do. The fact that we're fighting with them is completely asinine, and this may be the alcohol.
Ridiculous. No, it's not alcohol, bro. It's ridiculous. It's David and Goliath. Who are we fighting? We were fighting the Philistines.
Yeah,
Who's that?
The Philistines, which, as a lot of people are theorizing nowadays, were Greek sea raiders, were Greek Vikings, essentially.
Right, but today we call Palestinians Palestine. I'm not really sure about that theory.
Yeah, I think they're the same.
Palestinians, bro.
It's weird, but the modern day Arab Palestinian identity has nothing to do with the Philistines or Palestine that we see in the Bible. It has nothing to do with them.
It's called Philishtim, ends with an M in the Bible.
Yeah, exactly. The Christian, but
Philistine is the English translation.
Yeah, and that's the one we're using. But like, it has nothing to do with us and our modern neighbors. We can get along. We can have fun. I guarantee you that if I go, because I as an Israeli citizen, and me, Amir, and Kane are not allowed to go to West Bank cities, to a lot of these West Bank cities, because we're Israeli citizens. We go to these cities and we meet random people. We can go out drinking. We can go out and do it like that.
Oh, easily.
Everything would be fine. Like,
This is what I'm
we're
saying.
not natural enemy.
A conflict so old, it's ridiculous that it's still going on. Because we see personally every day that we can interact with Arabs just fine.
Yep.
Honestly, I'm a teacher I teach people over the phone. Aboud also, and honestly, I love my Arab students that I get. They are amazing. They're some of the nicest people.
They're really amazing. They really are. I mean, like, growing up in Delaware, we have a for some reason we have a lot of immigrants, and a lot of immigrants from Arab countries. Like, I've told you guys before, like, I went to high school with people who were from Egypt, Syria, and Yemen mainly. A lot of Yemenis and a lot of Egyptians, even a Coptic Egyptian, by the way, which was very interesting for me to learn about.
Persecuted a lot over there.
And they were generally amazing people. I remember there was this one Yemeni girl who was what's her name? A burqa. She wore a burqa to school, basically, except she didn't have the face covering. Everything was very like covered except for her face, and I could tell just through her face that like I had a bit of a crush on her. I'm not gonna lie, because like I don't know, her face was just so cute. It was just so attractive to me as a teenager, and even though everything on her was covered, even through the face, like I could tell that like, oh, this girl is something special. And they were the nicest people. I remember talking with them, and I was telling them, they're like, oh yeah, I'm Jewish. I'm also Israeli. My dad was born in Israel. And the one thing they all asked me was, it was just curiosity about Israel, about Jews, because they didn't know any Jews. They've seen Jews since coming to America, but they didn't know any of them. They just had questions. Which is issues I really think our podcast could at the very least do good on, which is show people that like, this is Jews. If you want to know us, watch these podcasts. We'll let you know us. These are Jews.
Not just us.
Yeah, not just us.
Many
Many
people. You'll see plenty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Eventually get our friend Laith on here. You're going to see for yourselves how well we interact with one another.
Yeah, and you can see, and hopefully in the future we'll have more Palestinians, because like, I'm gonna be honest, boys, right now it seems very lopsided towards Israel and Jews, but
It was not originally the plan. Yeah.
we'll fix that as soon as schedules line up. But for now, boys, I just want to give our closing statements on this inaugural episode. Because we've been on here, we've been talking a while, and I don't want to make things too difficult at this, unfortunately. So, closing statements, I'll give mine. We can do something here. We legitimately can do something here, boys. We can show people that we can get along. This is what Jews are. If you're Arab, and if you're Palestinian in particular, we do not hate you. If you're Arab, you're our cousins. If you're Palestinian, you're our brothers. And sisters. We won't be sexist. We can get along. We can have peace. But we have to reject the views that these corrupt government officials, I hit my mic, I'm sorry, that these corrupt government officials have had since 1948 about this conflict. We can have peace, and it starts with us. The everyday person, the everyday Israeli, the everyday Palestinian, the people who have to truly suffer with the consequences of this bullshit. We can change it. Because enough of us shout in a single unified voice,
Amen.
there will be peace. There will be an agreement. There will be civil rights for fucking everybody between the Jordan and the Mediterranean, regardless of heritage or ethnicity. But it requires every single one of us to shout.
Peace is its own reward,
That's
yeah.
my piece. We'll go Kane, Amir, Abood. Kane, give your final piece. I'm gonna finish my beer and have a smoke.
He smokes hookah, just so no one's getting suspicious. Um,
Somebody's gonna ask what the fuck this thing is.
yeah. Okay, so this has been our first fully planned episode of this podcast, and I think it's been brilliant, and I think it really shows, especially considering it's our first, that this can really go somewhere. And if you as the audience stick with us and you take an interest and you take it upon yourself to learn as much as you can, and get involved, tell us what you think, email us, whatever. There will be all that stuff set up for you to contact us very soon, and we need your help because we definitely can't do anything about this conflict alone. We need everybody to get involved, energy, passion, and really let's try and change the world, because I'm sick of living in this outdated, reality where people are still hating each other over stupid, like tiny differences in culture. It's just not necessary. And that's what I aim to stop with this. I don't think I'm alone on that one.
Not at all, man. Not at all. I'm not alone at all. We're with you 100% in all the way. And I think that what we're doing here can only be possible with the help of you guys and your input. We're really looking to try and push the conversation forward and to come up with ideas, plans of action that we can put in place and that we can implement to really help improve people's lives here, even from the smallest thing to the largest thing, like solving the conflict. The small thing might be cleaning up the neighborhood, just going around and different people in the neighborhood, go around, clean up. There's rubbish left everywhere, all over the street. It's polluted. I left this country for 6 years. I came back to beaches. There's plastic in the beaches. There's plastic in the water. There's so many small things going on that we have to take care of. If this is a holy land,
Yeah.
Yisraelim tem tzrichim lismur lev.
To pay attention.
Please, you need to listen to that, because I live up here. I've lived in a lot of cities. I've lived in I've lived in a place called Nesher, which is in the greater Haifa area. I've lived in Ramat Gan, the Tel Aviv area. I'm currently I live up here in Haifa currently. And let me tell you, you Israelis need to fucking take better care of your goddamn neighborhoods. I live in this community. I don't litter. I throw shit out in the trash. I pick up some trash that I find on the road and I throw it there. And if you have a pet, a dog specifically, if your dog shits in the street before you get to a patch of grass, or even if it doesn't, pick it up. Pick it up. That's a huge problem. Pick up your pet's shit. I am tired of dealing with this. I seriously am. I get up at 6 and I go to the store because I want to get some random shit. And all of a sudden I have to look at where I'm stepping because there's some shit on the road. I'm fucking tired of it.
2 days ago, bro. 2 days ago.
2 days ago.
Crazy.
And then my foot went whoop, and I was like, what the fuck? And I looked down. Guess what I saw?
All right.
Have in your communities rant over Amir. Your closing statement, go.
Amir just gave his.
I'll go, I guess.
Abood, no.
Sure.
I felt like I had to go to Amir because I interrupted him. Anyway, Abood, go.
Sure. I don't have a lot to say. I just I think that I'll say something like, I remember Kane when you first invited me to this. I'll be honest. I liked the idea. I loved it, and I immediately wanted to join. Although I was a little bit skeptical about what can we have as an impact. You know what I mean? I was very skeptical. And as days went through and as I understood what we're going to do, I was still skeptical, but I was like, maybe there's 0.5%, 0.1% chance that we might have a big impact. I'm not ready to give up on that. You know what I mean? So, no, things did change. The picture is clear, and it's really up to us and the audience also to help us spread the word and also help us share and also tell us what to talk about, things that are important. And I'll also leave with two quotes that I like about peace. One of them is by Frank Sinatra. He said, if you don't know the guy on the other side of the world, love him anyway, because he's just like you. He has the same dreams, the same hopes and fears. It's one world, pal. We're all neighbors. And Albert Einstein also said, peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding.
Exactly. Exactly.
He was a very wise man. Albert
That's the
Einstein.
name of the game here.
Fun
Understanding.
was offered the title of President of Israel by the Knesset after the War of Independence. Milchemet Ha'atzmaut here in Israel.
Yeah,
He was offered,
that's true.
yeah, he turned it down, but he was offered it. And he's a very wise man, and we should all take his words to heart. And anybody else have anything to add? No? Nothing?
Just thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for listening, and tune in. Stay tuned in, and keep a lookout for our new episodes. And
For
if
those who
there's any-
stayed.
if
I
there's
mean,
any
we're
questions-
movers and shakers, you know? Come on,
Yeah.
we've been talking 2 hours and we've already quoted Einstein twice.
For those of you who listened all the way till 2 hours,
Of course, we're gonna quote him.
What's that? Luke? Sorry.
I just said for those of you who stick with us all the 2 hours, kudos.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And
Namaste.
yeah,
as always.
Abu, I just want to clarify what you were saying about people sending in questions for us to talk about. We are more than happy if you guys have any certain things that you want to find out about or learn about. Maybe they don't even come into our head because we live over here. It's so obvious for us. Just mention them in the comments section. Happy to take people's questions and answer anything that you guys want to know.
Yeah.
We're just starting out on a YouTube channel, like, so we're gonna be so until we get a very big audience. If anybody watching this wants to comment, wants to ask us questions, just put it in the comments. We'll find it. We'll answer it in a future episode. Just put it in the comments until this gets unmanageable. But even then,
It's like we're telepathically linked, Jared. I was just about to say, you know, we have huge plans for this whole podcast and whatever else it may become in the future. But we need you to get us there because we can't do it without an audience. You know, trust us. We'll get to the point where you can come on the air live and talk to us. But, you know, that's why you need to get this out to all your friends so that they can see this and they can get on board with trying to change the world.
Yeah, exactly. And
Do that.
And so with our closing statement is more unites us than divides us. Israelim Palestinian more unites us than divides us. Aboud, can you say that in Arabic because I don't speak Arabic?
More divides us.
No,
No,
more
more unites us.
More unites us. More unites us than divides.
Abu's a warmonger.
Yeah, he's wrong. How did you get on this podcast?
But wait, what?
More unites Israelis and Palestinians more unites us than divides us. I said it in Hebrew,
Okay.
say it in Arabic.
اوكي فلسطينيين واسرائيليين واسرائيليين هاي الشغلة بتوحدنا أكثر من ما بتفرقنا. It was harder to translate than you thought, but it was okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Abu.
Absolutely.
I'm so happy to have you here, Aboud.
Thank you.
In the future, we'll hopefully have Laith, our fifth partner, who wasn't able to make it tonight because of work. But thank you for joining in. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for listening to our dumb stories, to our dumb opinions. Thank you for listening. Just thank you for having interest. And thank you to anybody who believes that we can get along, who rejects anti-Arab racism, Islamophobia, who rejects anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish racism. Thank you to those people. And nobody else has anything to add?
And anti-Samaritanism. I don't think that
Yeah, and
exists.
anti-Semitism. Right. So now, nobody has anything.
I don't-
Let the world know that Samaritans exist first.
exactly.
No. אחי, איכי השומרונים, אחי.
Close enough.
All of the Samaritans. So
Okay.
nobody else has anything to add? No? All right. Episode over.